Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Sammy Roth.
And I'm Rosie Murphy, and this is the podcast where, as you know by now, we talk about Lost.
At long last, we are here for the sixth and final season of Lost. We're sad to be doing this for the last time, but also excited because it's another great year of Lost, and we're happy that you're here with us.
We have so much lined up this year that we're so excited about. As you probably already know if you listened to the trailer, we have gotten to interview Terry O'Quinn, who really needs no introduction, but did play John Locke. We will be playing a portion of that conversation at the end of today's episode.
Yeah, so let's not have any further ado. Let's talk about LA Space X.
If you have been listening to The Hatch for a while, you know that we start every episode with our hot take about the episode that we have just watched. Sammy, what is your hot take about LAX parts 1 and 2?
So, hot take that is kind of hot, but I think people will agree with. Leslie Arst and Edward Mars. What jerks! Both of them! Mm-hmm. Terrible. First you got, and Arst, we love in the past for just being a buffoon, but first he's demanding that Hurley repeat his line from the commercial when Hurley clearly doesn't want to do it. Just leave the man alone. Arst is like, no, you have to do it. You have... Jerk. And then later, even worse, when he's standing by Sayid at the baggage claim, some kind of like side-eyeing Sayid, like, oh, who's this dark Middle Eastern fellow over here, and what's he up to? Like, clearly there was something racist going on there. So Arst is bad, 2 thumbs down for Arst. And also Edward Mars, like, clearly just having such a great time lording over Kate now that he's captured her, like, makes her beg to go to the bathroom. Like, I know that she ultimately did use it to try to escape, but come on, man. She has to go to the bathroom. Like, I know what his problem is, but just two real fuck faces in this episode.
Yeah, who do not seem to be any more enlightened in this sideways timeline than they were in the original, but...
If anything, they've gotten worse. Not the same, but I did enjoy very much the use of Frogurt to frustrate Kate's plan to hop into a taxi.
Oh, yeah.
When Neil Frogurt shows up there, that made me laugh pretty good.
I had to look up who that was. He has such a familiar face, but I couldn't remember where we'd seen him before.
Oh, yeah, that's good old Frogurt.
Mm-hmm.
Last seen in the Flaming Arrow attack, as I recall.
Yes, indeed.
On fire. Anyway, Rosie, what is your hot take about LA Space X?
So I think I have mentioned this on the show before, but in my original viewing of Lost, I stopped after the incident. I thought, that is the ending that I want. I like that it's ambiguous. I will choose my own adventure. And, this can end how I want it to end. And this was in... I think 2011, so season 6 had just aired. Of course, reviews had been mixed. And it wasn't until, I think, 2013, 2014, a few years later, that I went back and watched the full thing. And I have a lot of fondness for season 6. I'm super excited to get into it. But my memories of it are not that clear. And I say all this to preface this because it might be the most obvious thing in the world, but we know, 90 minutes into the season, exactly who John Locke is. It's very obvious after Jacob's death that he leaves the room, and shortly thereafter, the smoke monster comes out of the same place, and then Ben confirms it, and he says, oh, you're the monster. And I just forgot that we knew that so clearly, so quickly. I thought the mystery had been drawn out a little bit more, but...
I will say that in the season 5 finale, even though it's not stated explicitly, I think it's very strongly implied that Locke is the Man in Black. Like, because you start with the scene with Jacob and the Man in Black on the beach, and then when...
Right.
In fact, I think it's pretty explicit because the first scene Jacob says to the Man in Black, you're looking for that loophole, aren't you? And I forget if the word loophole was used again in the scene with the stabbing where Ben stabs him, but it's very clearly, I think, referred back to. So to me, it was made pretty clear there, but it's interesting that in your recollection, that was a mystery that was dragged on longer. Speaking of, we actually do have a hot take about LAX to play from a listener right now.
Hello, Sammy and Rosie. It's Audrey from Canada. So glad you're back for the new season. So this is my hot take for LAX. First of all, I just wanted to say that the Flash Sideways are really my favorite this season. I remember watching it on TV and losing my mind. I love the interactions, especially between the characters, that we've seen grown, and now it's like a new beginning, especially for Jack and Locke. The impact that they have on one another is still very much present, especially when Locke says, especially to Jack, that they did not lost his father. They essentially lost his body, his coffin. Oh, such a good line. And I feel like without the island and the survival, the survival aspect of their relationship, they can be more thoughtful. And I feel like it's a new beginning, but still very impactful for both of them. And really love the setup for Kate and Claire. I remember really loving also the adventure that they go on and the trust that they have on one another. So really interesting to see the characters still acknowledging that they kind of have a link between them, but, ready to explore some more. So, yeah, can't wait to see what you do with the next season, and have a good one. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for sending that, Audrey. Real quick, if you would like to send a hot take of your own, you can do so by calling us at 9546-DHARMA. If you are outside the U.S., just use the country code 1.
60 seconds or less if you can help it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anyway, I love this scene between Jack and Locke. I'm so excited to talk about it.
I mean, one thing that I found myself wondering a little bit, there's discussion, the whole thing with Christian's body. I mean, let's get into this. Mm-hmm. One, it's reminiscent of Christian in the island, right? Where it's like, you don't know where his body is. There's this question, is he really dead?
Right.
Where did he go? He's lost. It's a cool parallel. And then you get the Jack Locke scene, which is so beautiful at the end. And I think the best scene in the episode, one of the best scenes in the show. But Locke's speech, they didn't lose your father. They just lost his body. Mm-hmm. How could they know where he is? I feel like that's such a meta commentary on the fact that this is the afterlife and we don't know it yet. Like, they don't know where they are. Like, they're here, they're somewhere, could they really be lost? They don't know where they are. And, as Christian says to Jack in the finale, this is the place you made so that you could all find one another. And they're talking here about finding Christian and where is he? I think there's a lot going on there, and it just, so we can talk about that, but it also just made me wonder really big picture, like, if this is the place they all made together to find each other, why did they make it like this? Why did they create subconsciously this reality where the plane didn't crash, where things are a little different? Like, why was this the construct? So we don't have to go there right away necessarily, because there's a lot in the Jack Locke scene, but that's what I found myself wondering about there.
I love this question. Oh my goodness.
To remember and to let go, but why like this?
I mean, a few things come to mind. One is that it's the one thing that most of them had in common that wasn't the island. I mean, the experience that, most absent Penny and Juliet shared was this plane ride where they had some like surface level interactions and maybe sort of remembered one another, but maybe there's a sense of all of these consciousnesses or souls or whatever returning to the last place that they all knew that wasn't the island.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if they were going to do this, this would be one of the only ways to create a shared experience that they all felt was like somewhat realistic to them or something like that.
Yeah, or at least to start in that place, and then presumably the universe kind of unfolds from there as they all head in different directions.
Yeah. I also found myself thinking, like, maybe in some way, like, they all kind of wished, after everything they'd learned on the island, that they had a chance to, like, live their lives as if they hadn't crashed. Like, maybe this was sort of a little bit of a gift to themselves, or, a little bit of a blessing. Like, well, if we're gonna have this experience, like, at the very least, let's give ourselves a chance to, live as we might have, knowing what we know now. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how conscious the choice would have been or not.
oh, this is going to be such a fun season. Yeah. To live as we might have lived if the plane had never crashed. I mean, what's so interesting about the island and the afterlife, I'm so sorry I'm going to say this, it's almost like they're both versions of purgatory, right? It's almost like the island is this sort of like microcosm of a place where all the stressors and all of reality is suspended, basically, right? It's like there's no money here. We don't have jobs. We don't have to pay rent. Like, we have to create
have Twitter.
Thank God. We have to create this entirely new society, like with limited resources. It's almost like this bizarre retreat, but this other place where you get to grow in a way that you weren't able to grow in the real world because of all those constraints. Or constraints like, law. We have Kate and Sawyer who function outside the law and can't sort of participate in society per se. And you have family ties, and you have, Jin, who has all these obligations to Sun's father. And, we could go on for hours about this. And the thing that the island took away was all of those distractions, so that, not that there weren't like 60,000 things they had to overcome on the island, but do you know what I mean? Like, in that sense, it was almost like a clarifying or a cleansing experience, I think, for a lot of people.
Right.
And
except then the island had so many fucked up parts that now they need a real cleansing experience to deal with everything that happened on the island.
Right. Because the island was not, in fact, purgatory. It was a real place, but it fulfilled some similar functions, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
And now it's like, I wonder if there's a sense of like our souls or our consciousnesses have already been through this like bizarro world on the island. We have become different people. I mean, one of the things that was so striking about watching The Flash sideways is you're like, oh my God, this is like old Jack. This is Jack who has not yet had his conversion experience on Flight 316. This is like Jack who has not yet tried and failed all these times. It's old Jack. And this is like old Charlie, who is still like in active addiction and overdoses on the plane. And we know how much those characters grow. And I wonder if there's like, I'm sorry, we're 30 minutes into the recording and we're already at 6,000 feet. That's beautiful. Like, I wonder if there's a level on which like the characters' souls or sort of know what they can become. And now it's like, okay, let's become that, but in the real world. Like, to your point about the life we could have had, it's like, this is what I could have done in the world as it really is if I had had like the strength and the clarity that I was like able to access on the island because all that was removed.
Interesting.
Is that anything?
That's really, really interesting. Almost like, maybe even almost like they want to prove themselves that they can do it, not on the island.
Yeah.
Like, before they move on forever and, experience whatever is next for their consciousnesses. It's almost like they want to know, like, even off the island in quote unquote reality or some version of it, I can still be this person. I can still learn to be or remember that I was and remember how to be this new and better version of myself that I always wanted to be. And not just in this, liminal space hidden off from the rest of society. But here's a related idea as well. Jack says to Locke in the scene at the airport at the end, nothing is irreversible. Mm-hmm. And it's this kind of like stop and wait, oh my God, what did Jack just say? It's a beautiful line. But I feel like on the one hand, it's a commentary on the part of Jack that needs to change, that he thinks that he can, fix everything, fix everyone, fix Locke's back in this case.
Right.
And that, Jack needs to learn to let go.
Right.
But I think part of what we're talking about here is that even though Jack is learning this lesson that, there are some things you can't change, that it's actually really important for these characters to learn and to understand and to accept that they can change.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the whole point of this. Jack is so busy trying to fix others, and the point isn't that, fixing isn't a good idea. It's that in Jack's case, really, he's got to look at fixing himself first.
Before we go any further with this, I really want to play a hot take that we got in the break between seasons from our listener, Rachel, which ties together exactly this conversation with what we saw in the incident.
Excellent idea.
Hey, it's Rev Rachel, and I just wanted to say I'm just finishing up the incident episode, and Rosie, man, you just hit on it. You just hit on it. I mean, there's an ocean of things to choose from in this episode, but Rosie, your observation that Jack's need to fix things comes from his own sense of brokenness is so deep and is so accurate. I've been in relationships with people who are fixers, and their desperate need to fix other people, fix situations, fix everything so that everyone's okay comes from this place of inner brokenness. And Jack, in this last viewing, I think this is probably my 12th or 13th time of watching the entire series. And it was the first time since the first time that I fell in love with Jack, because I actually saw him as broken and not as cocky and not as arrogant and not as obnoxious as I was beginning to see him in other viewings. It was like, oh my God, he's broken and he can't fix himself, so he's going to fix everything around him. And in doing so, he's going to just destroy everything. And so Juliet's death and the whole implosion, now he has to carry that on top of all of his other brokenness. So Rosie, thank you for that observation. It was spot on it. Thank you. Great episode, you guys. Absolutely great. Thank you.
Yeah, so for me, this is really interesting to hear in contrast to what you've just been talking about, Sammy, is like our big revelation at the end of season 5 was like, oh my God, Jack isn't cocky and confident. He is deeply insecure and sort of wants to fix everything so that he doesn't have to turn his gaze on himself. And I think that is maybe the force that you're describing here.
No, I think you're completely right. I mean, I think this is really a season where, I mean, the flash sideways, the afterlife really makes the subtext text in a certain way, right? I mean, and this is what I meant at the beginning about, I think, enjoying it more, knowing what it is and realizing that, like, we realize now what we're watching. We're watching each of these characters kind of go through an accelerated version of, how do they become that person that they learned to become, gradually in their time on the island, and how do they sort of crystallize those lessons down for themselves and accept the importance of the people around them and sort of put those puzzle pieces together. Like, I think knowing what it's building towards, it's totally wonderful to watch, and to not, to not be just thinking, oh, this is some alternate timeline that branched off when Juliet smacked a bomb with a rock. Like, I actually think I like it better knowing what it really is.
I do too. I think it's easier to derive meaning from it because you're not so fixated on like clues to what it means, but instead we can fixate on like, what is it saying about the nature of the soul? Oh dear.
Definitely. What is it saying about the nature of the soul that Locke and Jack are just being so nice to each other? That was one of the other things I loved about that last sequence. Like, we were so used to them butting heads, and here they are just like genuinely trying to help one another. Like, it touched me to think that these two guys could have been maybe not friends, but could have, if they hadn't been in that circumstance together where events sort of pitted them into these roles. Jack asks him, what happened to your back? Maybe I could help. And Locke gives him an inspirational speech. Like, it's sort of like the moment in White Rabbit, which we're going to talk about with Terry, in the conversation this week, where Jack is struggling and Locke's giving him advice, but that could have been their relationship all the time, and not just in that one moment when it served both of their purposes. I felt like, maybe a place to ground us here, like, I thought this was an uneven premiere. There was some stuff that I thought was really transcendent, like the Jack and Locke scene at the end, like the final moments between Sawyer and Juliet. There was also stuff, I mean, like the Ben and Locke stuff in the, in the foot, which we'll talk about with Terry O'Quinn in a bit. Like, that was all incredible. But then at the same time, you have the Saeed storyline, where, like, literally every time they show Saeed on scene, the only two thoughts I have are, like, ugh, I know what's coming, and secondary, like, how the fuck is he still alive? Like, that's all I can think every time they show him. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then you've got, like, the stuff like the zooming down to the island on the ocean floor at the beginning, which is kind of bizarre and poor CGI, and also doesn't hold up well because it's supposed to kind of like make you think, oh, this is an alternate timeline and the bomb really exploded, but that turns out not to be the case, so it doesn't really make any sense. And then you've got like the false flag with the whispers, where it seems to pretty strongly answer here that the whispers are the others when you hear them in the temple, like running around right before they capture our people.
Oh, yeah.
Except then later we get the other explanation for the whispers, which nobody likes, which is that they're the people who are literally trapped on the island, kind of like purgatory. So, I don't know, there were some elements I really loved and some elements that I felt like didn't hold up super well.
Yeah, I found myself thinking about what Damon Lindelof told us last season about how you have all of these pieces on the board and you need to get them all to a certain place so that the action can happen. And that's what like what part one felt like to me in large part.
It did have some of that energy. So we're talking on island stuff. What did you think of the decision to have Juliet still be alive and those scenes with her and Sawyer and the digging for her? Because I have mixed feelings about it.
You know, on the whole, I think my feelings are mostly negative.
Yeah.
I think, it is a powerful moment when she's able to explain to Sawyer,
I wanted to make it so that you never came to this damn island. It didn't work.
But I just don't really know what it achieves for me. It's like, I think we would have felt for Sawyer just as deeply as we felt for him, having had that scene in there.
Agreed. I don't think we needed this to like bring Sawyer's grief into this season or make it more real. Like, it was such a brilliant and powerful ending before. I don't know how much this really added.
Yeah.
I mean, what I liked about it was the sort of like full circle aspect where it's foreshadowing the true ending of the season of the show, where you have, Juliet says, we can get coffee sometime, we can go Dutch. I mean, those are the lines that she says to Sawyer at the vending machine in the hospital in the finale where they reconnect and remember. Like, the idea that they set this up so that they're, now we understand that's her brain, like, kind of flitting between life and death and going to that moment here at the end. And that in her mind in this moment, it means it worked because there's this other timeline, as, her last thoughts, it worked, that she wanted to share. So I liked that aspect of it. Yeah, overall, I just felt like, I didn't like how they dragged it out. Like,
yeah,
it felt like the first scene where she was explaining what she did pressing the bomb. Like, I know you said you liked part of that, but to me it felt like a logistical scene where you needed the logistics of that to then make the it worked part make sense. And I just felt like if they're going to bring them back together, like, they should have just cut right to the part at the end where it was one last goodbye between them, kiss me blondie, etc., or kiss me Sawyer. They could have just stuck with that, but yeah, I felt like I've already been through this, like, and it was more powerful the first time.
Yeah.
Josh Holloway, I will say, was so good. Like, he killed it in those scenes. I also love seeing his work in the Flash Sideways, where he still seems like very much he has the con man persona going on, but it's just fun to watch knowing that that's not who he is there, and that it's like, ooh, I don't remember, why is he helping Kate even though he's a cop? Like, I don't remember that. I'm looking forward to finding that out. Like, it's really fun. Like, I like
and they leave it a little bit ambiguous as to whether he knows that she's in handcuffs or, like, did he see on the plane that she's wearing handcuffs? We're not super sure. Yeah, lots of fun.
Super, super, super fun.
So you mentioned earlier feeling a little bummed out whenever you see Saeed in season 6. And I hear you, and I agree. Okay. But I want to talk about the scene where they get to the temple and Jack decides to let the others treat Saeed.
Oh God, I have thoughts on this too.
Okay, because they more or less ask Jack's permission, and at the beginning of the season premiere, we've seen Jack say, like, I can't fix him, there's nothing I can do, and that's part of why they go to the temple in the first place. This is not something Jack ordinarily does, right? To say, there's nothing I can do. It's...
Well, I mean, the part that stuck out to me was when they ask him, they say there could be complications.
Yeah, and he doesn't really push back.
He just says, go for it. Like, he doesn't even ask what they are, like...
Which felt a little out of character, and I think it's exactly what Rachel was talking about in her voicemail, right? I mean, Jack seems to regret this almost immediately when they're holding Saeed underwater. He goes to administer CPR to allegedly dead Saeed, and...
that scene had such echoes of the Boone scene.
Oh my God, yes.
Jack gave up much more quickly this time, but I thought that was a pretty powerful moment, actually. Even though the rest of the scene annoyed me, I liked that part.
Yeah, the Jack that we know is still there.
He is, and I'll also admit that I kind of laughed when he went to like tackle Dojin or whatever to get to Saeed, and Dojin just like elbowed him one time, and Jack was just out. Like, I kind of enjoyed how overmatched he was, but positive. Matthew Fox I thought was incredible in this episode.
I agree. Like,
I immediately felt like, oh, this is why he got nominated for an Emmy for the sixth season of Lost. Like, it wasn't just because they felt like, they needed to do something to recognize Matthew Fox because he was the star of a popular TV show. Like, this was the first time watching Lost where I felt like, wow, Matthew Fox is really bringing it. Like, the scene on the plane at the beginning where he's kind of like a little confused, even though he doesn't know why he's confused, and the scene with Locke at the end, and the CPR, like, just bringing it scene after scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, the Saeed stuff, it kind of put a damper on the episode for me, because I know that I don't like what's coming. It was kind of a lame ending with him waking up. And
well, and this is where we get into like, is he really alive at the end of this episode, or is he just, under the control of the darkness or what?
Here's the thing, I don't care. It's not Saeed anymore.
Right.
Like, the Saeed in the Flash Sideways is the real Saeed. Like, when he shows up and kicks down the bathroom door, even though no one asked him to, like, that's the Saeed I know and love. Not this weird shell of a human being.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
Not super excited.
We have an entire episode that we get to spend talking about that.
That's true. I also wasn't, as long as we're in the temple, like, I really like Hiroyuki Sanada, the actor who plays Dojin. I like John Hawkes, who plays Lennon. He was on Deadwood. I kind of found myself wishing that they had given these guys like more interesting stuff to do.
Yeah. Like
the Temple others overall, I kind of meh on as well.
Yeah. We've talked about this before. I'm just not super convinced by the Temple.
Yeah. These are the others, and they seem nothing like the others.
These people seem like the people who would have kidnapped Walt because they thought he was special.
Huh. Interesting.
Not to bring that back up.
No, that's very interesting.
But I could actually kind of see that.
That holds up. That holds up.
I do think a great scene is when Hurley is brought back to speak to the temple elders and tells them that Jacob is dead. And they don't know. And then the temple like springs into action to prepare for the siege. I thought that was really effective and well done, and definitely made me feel like, oh, these people recognize the scale of the threat here. Yeah,
that was an impressive moment for Dojin as well to jump into action there. No, I agree with that. Hurley was good in this in general. Like, I enjoyed him, pressing back about...
Hey, excuse me. I carried that case across the ocean and, through time. So I want to know what that paper says.
Also, I think I said this last year, but the fact that they've been setting up the guitar case thing since 316 back in, early season 5, that is some impressive plotting right there. Did they know exactly what would be in the guitar case? I don't know, but I liked how they worked that one out.
See, I didn't love how they worked that one out.
No? Oh.
You open it, and it's this, totem. And then they just immediately break the totem and pull a note out.
I thought that was hilarious.
It was hilarious, but not in a in a way that I was sort of like, okay.
I
Is this
enjoyed
the
it.
way Jacob sends messages? I'm not sure this is effective.
You know what else was funny? I don't even know. I forget if this was in the transcript on Lostpedia, but when Kate is in line for the taxi stand at the airport and Hurley is on the phone behind her, and you kind of like can listen to little snippets of Hurley on the phone, one of the things he says is, Outback is just a name. You saying they own the entire Outback? That's just stupid. And then like, okay, Outback Steakhouse has given Mr. Clux some trouble here. Like there's some subplot going on that we're never going to get.
Of some kind.
Seriously, I enjoyed that immensely.
That's funny.
And then there was also a line where Hurley says, and this one definitely wasn't on the Lostpedia transcript, but it's in the subtitles on Hulu. Hurley says, "Oh, and I didn't get the Tustin inventory report yet. Tustin is the city where the box company is based, where a couple episodes down the line, Locke gets fired and bumps into Hurley in the parking lot. So whatever inventory report didn't get filed, Hurley was going to check it out at his box company. Mm-hmm. So that's some real subtle foreshadowing right here.
I do have a question that you might know the answer to. Why is Desmond on the plane?
For intrigue.
I mean, obviously, yes. And it works because it's I think the first clue we get that like this is not actual Oceanic 815 on the day that it crashed. Desmond wasn't there.
That's a good question. I mean, I think probably what it goes back to is the idea that, you know, this is a place they all made together to find each other. And I was just thinking about it. I think that I was about to say that I think everyone who was in the church at the end was on the plane, but that's not quite right because Penny was in the church.
Right.
But I kind of think everyone except Penny was on the plane.
Well, and Juliet's in the church. She wasn't on the plane.
That's true. Juliet's in the church, so my theory doesn't quite hold up. I don't know. I don't know that there's a good reason for that, besides the fact that, you know, Desmond is clearly a part of, you know, their group and their story.
It is extremely intriguing. It works. I think it works super well.
Well, especially the part where then he can't find Desmond later, and it's like, ooh, did Desmond disappear? Was he really there? Was he a figment of Jack's imagination? Like, that was pretty cool.
It's well done.
It is. You know what else is well done? I mean, Jack looking in the mirror and seeing the cut on his neck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really did this premiere knowing exactly how the show was going to end, like exactly what between that and the, you know, Let's Go Dutch stuff with Juliet. Like they knew exactly, like beat for beat, what the key beats in the finale were going to be, and I'm impressed by that. I think that holds up quite well.
Yeah.
Should we? Should we share our conversation with Terry? Has the time come?
I think we've said about all we can say here. Terry O'Quinn really needs no introduction. We know him as John Locke. He has played many other roles in many other television shows and films, but here's Terry.
Terry, thank you very, very much for being with us on The Hatch.
Glad I could be here, guys.
So typically we like to start at the beginning. Do you remember how you got cast on Lost?
I remember getting a call from, I don't remember the order, but I remember getting a call from J.J. Abrams, saying that they were going to make the show, and that there might be a part for me if I was interested. And I said, I'm interested. I'm always interested, and especially in what he's doing. And he said, well, but it is in Hawaii, and I was like, yeah, I can live with that. So they sent it to me, and he said it's not a big deal at first, and it's gonna, but we think it will develop into something that you'll enjoy. And I said, all right, well, that's cool. So and I believe that was it. And I think when they sent it, when I saw the first script, I thought, yeah, okay, well, there's not a lot, but it looks like fun, so let's go see where it goes. I always, quite honestly, I look at my bank book as well as other things and kind of go like, yeah, how does this job look? Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yeah. You knew JJ from Alias, presumably, right?
Yes, and when I was on Alias, Jennifer Garner and Victor Garber and those guys were all so very cool. It was such a lovely cast, and they kept on calling me back and giving me all the descriptive stuff to do and all the hard words to say. And Victor said, finally, they should make you a regular. And I said, well, that would be lovely. So I think Victor and Jennifer and a couple of people went to JJ and said, you should make Terry a regular. And JJ said, well, we can try that, but the network won't go for that. If you're getting the milk free, why are you going to buy the cow thing? So I'd already proven that I was willing to go. But he said to me, JJ, that we will find something that you and I can do together that you will love and that you'll be taken care of. And I said, okay, good. I look forward to that.
So when you get to Lost, obviously you said there's not a lot for John Locke at first, but he's mysterious. He has a box full of knives. He seems to think there's something special about this place, and he has this miracle happen to him. I mean, you wake up on the island and you wiggle your toes, and suddenly you have the ability to walk again. We're just kind of curious, what was your initial impression of this character, and what was it like for you trying to bring to life this sort of profound life-altering miraculous experience?
At first it was mysterious to me. I mean, they set the tone, at least to me, I can't speak for everyone, of not telling me anything that they didn't think I needed to know, which I appreciated. In fact, later on in the series, I said, please don't give me any heads up, because I don't want to start acting things early, because you can start leaning into things that they're going to reveal later, them, and the audience doesn't need a clue. I'm sort of, if you're faithful to what the writers write, I mean, then the whole object is to fulfill what they want you to fulfill in each scene and in each episode. They didn't tell me much, so I didn't know John Locke had been confined to a wheelchair when he got on the plane. In the first episode, I didn't know I had been in a wheelchair. I didn't find that out until I got episode 3, Walkabout, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's when it was revealed to the audience. It was only revealed to me, one episode before that, when I got the script. And it was actually a joyful experience, both to make and to read, but especially to watch. And I think that was, largely due to the direction and to Giacchino. So it was a happy time, yeah. And it was just cool. Then I thought, okay, I'm the magical guy. That was wonderful. That happened to me several times, by the way, on the show. I said, I'm just going to assume, I would say to like Jack Bender, I said, okay, I'm just going to assume I can't be killed. He said, well, okay. He said, okay, go with that. I said, all right.
Well, actually, there is a point at which the character John Locke's body turns up in a coffin. Do you remember thinking he was actually dead at that point?
No, I don't. I didn't think that, because for whatever reason, I don't even know how, but I knew I was going to go on. Mm-hmm. I knew this, I would be going on with the show. So, and also I remember when they shot that, somebody else must have told you this in your talks with other cast, that they shot that same scene. They put 3 of us in the coffin and filmed us all and taped us all in the coffin, recorded us all in the coffin.
I've heard about this. I think Desmond Ian Cusick was one of the other ones, but I forget who the third one was. They were trying to avoid spoilers, right?
I believe it was Josh. Yeah, I believe it was
Sawyer. Sawyer. That's right.
And they put all of us in the coffin. Now they hadn't even told the cast at this point who was, but when they spent 10 minutes on those guys and an hour and a half on me, I thought it's John Locke in the coffin.
That's funny. Well, I'm going to skip ahead a little here, if that's okay, Rosie, just because we're talking about this and we can back up. We're watching the 6th season right now, where you spend half the season playing John Locke in the the sort of alternate reality where the plane didn't crash, and then half the season playing the villain, the Man in Black, on the island. And it's not even revealed. I mean, they bring your body back to the island, and then it sort of seems like you're awake and you're alive again and you've come back to life, but really it turns out you're playing the Man in Black, the villainous character who's taken over Locke's body. I take it, based on what you've told us, you probably didn't know what was going on at that point. They probably didn't tell you who you really were.
That was exactly the moment, the moment that you're speaking of. And I think it was the episode when we were on the beach, and I'm standing up to my knees in the water, and Kate brings me a mango. And I think it's Kate.
Yeah, that's right.
She's eating the mango. And I remember the line was, "This is the best mango I've ever tasted." And I didn't put the weight into it I realized, I think later, that probably the first mango he had tasted in hundreds of years or something. I didn't put it all together. And that was the point at which I said to Jack Bender, probably within that very hour, I'm just going to assume that I can't be killed. And he said, because that was important to how I portrayed that character, which that had a lot to do with how the Man in Black, being played by me, acted toward Ben and toward other people. I had nothing to fear. So
yeah, that comes through very much. I mean, he comes off as this. It's not brazen, it's not brash, but it's very confident in a way that sort of the previous iteration of John Locke.
And I had to discover that gradually, actually, because nobody said to me, okay, here are the A, B, and C of all of how it is and how it's going to be. And I kept on reminding them, I don't want to know. Don't tell me. I'll just play. If there's something you think I need to know, or if there's something I'm playing wrong or poorly because what you haven't told me, then tell me. But if it serves your purpose, then don't tell me.
Interesting. I just have to cut in here for a quick second and say that I looked it up because I know that we're going to have listeners who correct us if I don't. It was actually the character Ilana, played by Zuleika Robinson, who gave you the mango.
Okay.
Kate.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
but otherwise accurate.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, good. Well, I'm sure there are people, yourselves among them, who remember a lot of it much more particularly than I do.
Yeah.
It was pretty confusing to me at the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that's amazing, I think, about your portrayal of the, especially those last, 2 seasons where first you're the Man in Black and then you're in the alternate reality as well, playing the John Locke where the plane didn't crash. Watching back those scenes where you didn't really have any idea what was going on, that they didn't reveal till later, it holds up so well. It feels like, the sort of all-knowing quality that you bring to the character, the pathos of having been alive and fighting this battle with Jacob for thousands of years. It feels like that must be in your head somewhere because it just holds up so well with what comes later. I don't know exactly how you accomplish that without more information, but it's great.
Well, I think honestly, if to the extent I did accomplishment, it was because I didn't have more information. I had to play everything pretty much straight and with what I knew. And I think too often we tend as actors to play the end of the story, or to play some revelation in the story, and we start playing it early, and that doesn't really serve either the writers or the audience. So I think it helped to not know anything that was going to happen.
Yeah. Interestingly, I think that's like a theme of John Locke's character as well, not just your work. He has this, especially in the early seasons, this sense of faith in the island or the universe or whatever you want to call it, and this sense of purpose. And he's really set up as a foil to Matthew Fox's character, Jack. How did you and Matthew, if you ever talked about that together, how did you approach playing up those differences? There's this man of science, man of faith dichotomy that really runs through a couple years of television there.
Yeah. I don't know that we had to do work. I think we were different enough from the get-go.
Yeah.
Matthew and I and Jack and Locke, I think both tried to play true to the character we understood, and we discussed. I don't know how much Matthew did, but Matthew and I didn't discuss anything about our relationship that didn't seem necessary for a scene.
Yeah.
So I've always thought that this was kind of brilliantly cast. I mean, I really do. I think, I thought Matthew was sort of born to play that, and a number of other characters, but that one as well. And I certainly felt at home in John Locke's body. And, Sawyer was Sawyer. There was that's who Josh is. And so that was fun and kind of wonderful, so we just, the whole man of faith thing and man of science was, I've since in thinking about it, people have said, you were the man of faith. And I said, well, I believe that's true. But I think more than anything, Locke was a man desperate to have faith in something, because he had nothing to have faith in throughout, throughout his whole history. And so when the island gave him what it gave him, he thought, this I can have. There's something I can grab onto and have faith in. And once he committed himself to that faith and to that belief, he was not going to be shaken.
You know, it's interesting to look back and try to evaluate who Locke really was. One of the interesting things in the last season is that as the Man in Black, you deliver some very uncharitable lines of dialogue about John Locke and his faith. There's a speech that you make to Ben where you're you ask him, do you want to know what John Locke's last thought was as you choked the life out of him? His last thought was, I don't understand. You remember that line, yeah. And then later there's another line of dialogue where as the Man in Black, you say to Jack, John Locke was not a believer, he was a sucker. So I guess I'm just curious, keeping in mind, how Locke died and what he was thinking and all that. What do you make of him when you go back? Was he a brilliant believer and a leader? Was he a sucker, as the Man in Black says, or somewhere in between?
I think, first of all, when you analyze, you could call almost any believer suckers. You could just say to have somebody who is a believer and not a sucker is to assume that apparently they're smart enough to know everything more than everybody. They understand everything, and yet they believe. Or, John Locke simply chose, I'm not expressing myself very well, but, there are those who look at any people of any faith and say, well, they've obviously they've been drinking the Kool-Aid and they bought into that, But when I remember saying that line to Michael, and I had to do it several times when I said, you know what John Locke was thinking when you choked the life out of him? He was thinking, I don't understand. It still gets me because it was so sad, but it was so true. And as the Man in Black saying those lines, I couldn't not sympathize with John Locke. I couldn't completely turn off that spigot. So there was still some John Locke in there saying, like, you know what he was thinking, and poo-pooing him. But I still had enough for that. I said I couldn't say that. I said, I'm sorry, I got to go again. I'm not supposed to be weeping when I say that line. I'm supposed to be tough.
You're supposed to be relishing in his suffering.
Well, to some extent, or at least shrugging off the sacrifice.
Yeah.
He was not even a player, just somebody that I used as the Man in Black and available.
Well, it's interesting because
of his faith.
Because of his faith. Well, I was just going to say that, it's hard to get around in some ways how his life ends, because it does end in this very kind of horrific, sad, and depressing way. But then in the final episode, when you as the Man in Black are having your last confrontations with Jack, he says to you, you're not John Locke. You disrespect his memory by wearing his face, but you're nothing like him. Turns out he was right about most everything. I just wish I could have told him that while he was still alive. And it's this wonderful kind of, vindicating moment for the character that at the very least, his life might have ended in this sad way, but he brought Jack on board in the end.
Yes, but I'm not sure that I understand necessarily what Jack would have told him, or what, in fact, what John Locke was right about, or if he knew what he was right about. I don't know. He was blindly following, and he was, he made decisions based on his instinct and his desire, and as much as faith, it was the desire for his belief to be right and for something to believe in. And to make a difference. He desperately wanted to contribute and to be recognized for contributing, I think.
Rosie was asking about Matthew Fox earlier, and just a quick follow-up on that. You had so many great scenes with him. You had the scene walking out to the hatch where you have the man of science, man of faith dialogue, and that the amazing shot where the two of you are staring down the hatch together, and all sorts of stuff through the years. Just wondering, are there any particular moments that you had playing against him that stand out in your mind, that you remember, what it was like?
I haven't watched it since the first viewing. I watched it with the audience and week by week. So if I watched it again, I'm sure I would have, and I'm sorry that I didn't. I apologize for that.
We were not expecting you to go rewatch Lost in preparation for this interview.
Well, at some point I probably should, because there were moments when I still remember walking out with him and him talking about he had just seen his father, and saying, like, a leader is you have to know where you're going, and I forget the particular words now, but there was a scene where he and I were talking about it before we bumped heads too much. And but not really. There was more just a general feeling of something, a large thing to avoid conflict with, or to get around, or to try to convince. And I remember shouting at him, why is it so hard for you to believe? Why is it so easy? It's never been easy. Those kinds of scenes, but we bumped heads a lot.
The scene you were referencing before about following his father through the jungle, that was White Rabbit early in the first season. That's where you deliver the line, "What if all this happened for a reason? What if..." No, that was later on. It was a good scene regardless. Now I'm getting them confused. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a long show. It's a good show. If you ever rewatch it, you'll like it.
Yeah. Well, I believe so. I hope so.
Yeah.
I lived with it so long and so closely for so long. But the funny thing is, people have sent me, I've seen like a clip. And there was some clip, I don't even know who exactly I was talking to. And clip, and I'm like lying on my side or something, and I'm saying, Richard says that I have to die, and there's like tears rolling down my face, and then whoever the guy is that I'm talking with says, well, that's why they call it sacrifice. But I have no recollection of that scene, none whatsoever.
That one I remember. That was with actually, it turns out that other character was really the man in black, but he was in the form of Jack's father. The actor John Terry played Christian Shepherd.
Right.
That was right before you moved the island by turning that big wheel. You had fallen down the well, and he appeared to you.
Yes. Okay. Well, there you go.
Anyway.
Yeah. Somebody else we were really curious to ask about is Michael Emerson, who played Ben. We've had the chance to talk with him a couple times, and those two characters just have such fascinating interactions. Both John Locke and the Man in Black in terms of Ben. And Ben, of course, kills John, tries to kill him a couple of other times. What was it like working with him?
It was always wonderful working with Michael, because Michael and I have sort of a shared history, not that we ever knew each other before, that we first met when he showed up on the set. But we have, we both a similar age, a similar way of approaching our work. It was always nice to work with Michael because I always believe that if you run into any bumps in a scene and you're having a hard time exactly getting a hook on it, on the scene, or I'm going, I can't quite. So, I talk with Michael. Michael will give me his thoughts. In the end, you'll always go to the director if you can't find help anywhere else. But Michael and I would always discuss scenes. I mean, I remember one day, and I really can't remember the particular scene. Michael came in, and we had a scene together, and he was addressing the scene a certain way, so that at a certain point in the scene, something he said sort of drove the energy of the scene. And that wasn't how I had seen it, as I read it and rehearsed it in my head. And so I had another way, but I said to him, I didn't say to him, I said to myself, okay, Michael has this shape he wants to play, so let's just play it that way. And then at some point I said, did it ever occur to you that if maybe this and this, that maybe the hinge is mine in the scene, not because I'd need it, but just because that seems to be the way it should play. And he said, no, it's not. I don't think it is. We called Bender, and Bender came over and said, yeah, it's Locke's. Yeah, it's Terry's. I said, okay. It happens sometimes. But the wonderful thing about Michael is you could always discuss it. What we were looking for wasn't preeminence in a scene. We were looking for how to make it fit perfectly into the puzzle that they were designing. And so Michael always had that in mind. He never had any trouble getting attention. I mean, I enjoyed it because we both fell on the dark side of the scale. And so whether we were bumping heads, as we were often, we were operating in the same territory, which was sketchy.
Yeah. There are a lot of moments where it feels like the two of you are aligned but uneasily so, and you're sort of working towards separate goals, but it's convenient for you to work together. And so there's this constant kind of power struggle, but it's very muted. It's really fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I remember that whole adventure of going to the cabin with Ben.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, and going and how each of us sort of playing our separate cards, and it was always great fun. Michael's actually the person I probably am in touch with more than anyone else since the show. Although I haven't talked to him in a few months, but we do stay in touch.
The cabin episode is the one where he at the end shoots you and leaves you for dead in the pit full of skeletons, which is quite a moment.
Yes, and but there's a funny story around that if you will indulge me.
Yeah, please. That's why we're here.
It's what's her name who comes with the boat, and she's coming to oh my God, the woman I threw the knife into her back.
Oh, Naomi.
Yeah, played by Marcia Thomason.
Yes. So I'm lying in this pit of skeletons, and I'm about to climb out, and because after older Walt comes and talks to me, and I'm climbing out, and my knife is in the bottom and laying in the ground, and I said, well, I'll just get out, and Jack's Bender and whoever was the script supervisor on that day, she turned to Jack, she said, he needs his knife because he has to stab Naomi, and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So anyway, I get my knife, and so I go back to the main set because they were shooting that with a second unit. So I go back to the main set where everybody is, and everybody's gathered, pretty much the whole cast. And they said, how did that go? I said, well, it went fine, but it appears that I'm going to be killing your new castmate. And then I hear this voice says, what? And I was like, oh, there she is. She's sitting right over here. And I remember Daniel Day Kim going like, oh my God. And I walked over to her and I said, let's take a walk. And I said, I'm sorry, they said this to me as I was getting out of the thing, that you have to kill the new castmate. So if you were planning on buying a house here, you probably shouldn't go forward with that. I said, but I'm sorry that you heard it like that. I didn't know you were there. But that seems to be how it's going to go down. Sorry.
No.
That's rough. I wonder... I was just going to say,
I was practically going like, "Oh, this is wonderful."
For those who are listening along with us and not here on the Zoom, Terry is kind of twirling his fingers together like I don't know what the term for that is, but an evil kind of look.
Dr. Evil sort of thing, yeah.
That's funny. I was just gonna ask about one or two other scenes with Ben because there are so many good ones. You have the amazing sequence at the end of the fifth season where you're in the giant statue of the foot. And, it's the scene where you've brought him there to stab Jacob to death. And there's finally the reveal of Mark Pellegrino as Jacob, and Ben stabs him. And then you end up kicking his body dramatically into the fire to burn up. Great scene with the three of you guys. I was just wondering if you remember anything in particular about filming that or what you were trying to bring to that scene.
I don't in particular, and I gotta say, quite honestly, this is where I get confused.
Yeah.
People ask me about this and that, or when did this happen, and I only just was reminded by you that was in the statue of the foot.
Yeah,
it was. So, okay,
it was.
But no, I don't remember things in particular about that, except that it was another sort of Man in Black win, and how nice it was in that last season to be able to trick Ben a few times.
A couple things that Terry said that really, really jumped out to me. One is that Locke was a man who was desperate to have faith in something. And the island
so well said.
Became that thing, and that's, it sort of could have been anything. But it became the island. And then he also said later, as much as it was faith, it was a desire to be right. Like he wanted to contribute, he wanted to be recognized, he wanted to play a role in this place, in this thing that they were doing, which I think is like a very human desire, right? We all want to contribute. And we know that Locke did not exactly feel like he was contributing in a meaningful way back in the real world. But I like the idea of both those forces at work in Locke. On one hand, it's this curiosity, this drive to investigate, to have faith in this thing. And in the other hand, it's like, I think that feeling we all share of like, I want to contribute. I want people to know that I'm contributing. I want them to recognize me for something special.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's really deeply related to, the other comment he made about, is Locke a believer or a sucker? And he says, well, from one perspective, you can call almost anyone who's a believer a sucker, because, we do want so badly to be part of something bigger than ourselves and to have some purpose that it can be, very easy to, I don't want to say fall prey to, because I don't want to say that, having faith is a predatory thing. Like, faith can be a very beautiful thing for a lot of people, but I think that is what drives, a lot of us to, to religious causes or to, these sort of organizational infrastructures that tell you, this is what your purpose is, or this is, the thing that you can be a part of that's contributing something to the world. Like, for Locke, it was not, it was not a church or a temple. It was very personal and related to what he saw as the island, giving him this gift. But the whole idea that, is he a believer or a sucker? Maybe it's not either, or maybe it's kind of one and the same. I thought that was really interesting how he addressed that question.
I agree.
And I also really enjoyed hearing him talk about how difficult it was for him to deliver that line. About John Locke, and to be so uncharitable. And he says, I'm not supposed to be weeping when I say that. To think that he identified so strongly with this character that he had trouble saying that stuff without starting to cry. It's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to talk about in season 6, don't we?
So definitely looking forward to keeping this conversation going with Terry next week, when we'll talk more about Locke's and the Man in Black's journeys in this 6th season.
A couple logistical notes as we take off on our journey here. Both Sammy and I's lives have just gotten really busy over the last 5 years, oh my goodness, or however long we've been doing this podcast. So in order to bring you a very, very high quality, thoroughly discussed episode each week, we're actually not going to release episodes each week. We're going to start out every other week. So our next episode for What Kate Does will release on May 31st. If things lighten up, we may be able to jump back into weekly, but we want to make sure that we're giving everything the time it deserves.
Yeah, and we've got a great lineup of guests this year. We don't want to give it all away right now, but we already told you we'll have Nestor Carbonell back on talking about Ab Aeterno. We'll have a couple of directors, including Bobby Roth, who we've had on before, talking about the episodes they directed, and several other returning actors and other folks we've had on the show before, who I think you'll be very, very excited to hear from again.
In the meantime, we already mentioned this, but we would love it if you would call and leave us your hot takes. You can do so at 9546-DHARMA. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/TheHatchPodcast and on Twitter at TheHatchPodcast.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, and our cover art is by Danny Roth.
See you next time.
Namaste.